I'm going to say a little something about me in my story, in my journey. And I'll use the sort of pointer. Okay, good, you can see it. So I was born in Warwick, Rhode Island. So that's where the Providence airport actually is. I went to, but my dad was from Peru. And so that's like my Latino heritage. That's the Diaz part of my name. Yeah, he met my mom, who was a Rhode Islander, and they started a family there. When I have a couple of older siblings and one younger sibling, all of my siblings turned out to be civil engineers. I rebelled. Just before high school, there were kind of the bubble burst in one of the technology boom bursts, and my dad lost his job, and we all moved so he could get a job in Boston. And so I moved up to high school just outside of Boston. And I started getting involved in math team there, but I was like, I'm not going to be a math major, whatever. I'm going to be a biologist. Yeah, see, that sort of turned out, not exactly. But I was at University of Maine studying zoology, and for fun, helping everybody with their math homework. And then I was like, maybe I should take a math class. And then I was like, maybe I should take another math class. And then I was like, I just need a break from all these chemistry and biology courses. I'm just going to take all math and computer science classes, and then the rest of the story. Pretty nonlinear path, but what I had realized is that I could actually study biology questions using mathematical tools. And I was like, oh, I can do both. I don't have to choose anymore. This is amazing. So that's what I did. And I first started in computational neurobiology when I was at University of Maine. And then started to find an area called evolutionary theory and population genetics, and went to the University of Tennessee, where I could study interdisciplinary, in an interdisciplinary program where I could do both math and biology. While I was at UMaine, I met my husband, who's from Maine. We had two beautiful kids. One who is like a music fan, the other one is a chess player, so you may hear me talk about that. I was when I first left Tennessee, I had a visiting position at a very, very, very small environmental liberal arts school. When I say small, I mean like 260 students, small, in Bar Harbor, Maine. It was absolutely wonderful. And so I moved from there to my very first full-time position at Unity College, which was also an environmental school. So I was teaching math and programming and statistics just for wildlife biology majors and things like that. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And then I was like, I feel like I've done a lot here. I had been 8 years there. I don't know if it's like the 7-year itch or whatever, but I was like, I think I'm ready for next level. And I had some wonderful friends and colleagues at Bates College, one of them, Adriana Salerno, who some folks might know, who said, you should come to Bates. And okay, so I moved to Bates. That was about 7 years ago, to be starting a program in digital and computational studies, which was an interdisciplinary program. And I felt like this is good, because I don't have to choose between math or biology or who am I, or do I do computer science, or do I do education research? I don't have to choose. I'm just everything. And that was a really freeing experience, and it's been really wonderful. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how that sort of trajectory has interfaced with my overall mission for equity and inclusion and welcomingness in this community. And I stumbled across this beautiful quote by Chico Mendes, who was an environmental justice advocate. And he said at first he was fighting to save the rubber trees. Then I thought I was fighting to save the Amazon rainforest. Now I realize I am fighting for humanity. And he ended up becoming a real advocate for indigenous rights and getting a lot of folks involved. And I think this follows my trajectory, because part of why I got into biology to begin with was was really concerned about biodiversity and conservation and sustainability. And as I spent more and more time in that world, I realized that requires human participation, and then which humans, and I started feeling like, oh wait, there's a whole another aspect to this that I'm missing. And at some point, it had felt like who I was as a person had become very separated from who I was as a mathematician. And so I was doing some soul searching. Part of that was coming to Bates. I had this intention about where I wanted to go in my life, and then the sabbatical happened. And so I did like a sabbatical dreaming. So this pandemic happened. So I started dreaming about my sabbatical to like get out of my brain during the pandemic. And I said like, okay, we're in this now, but in a couple of years I got sabbatical. So what am I gonna do in a couple of years? And I said, I think I want to do a lot more of this data science for social justice stuff. I had just started publishing some papers that were really looking at social justice in mathematics. I had done this study with Chad Topaz. Some folks might know about letter writers who think, and their opinions on diversity statements as required for job applications and so forth, and did an analysis with Chad Topaz on that. And I was like, I like meshing these skills together. And I said, I think the thing I am missing is a sense of place. So what I mean by this is that a lot of social justice research has a very strong sense of place component. And as an academic, I think we move from place to place, or we're asked to move from place to place. And we want to give back, but then where? Which place do we give back to? And so around the same time, ICERM released this invitation to apply for organizing a long program. And I said, I think I want to organize a long program back in Providence, back in my home turf, or at least the turf of my Latino family. And I want to do something meaningful with my Latino community back there. So let me tell you just a little bit about Providence, for those that don't know. Providence has a lot of different neighborhoods, and I'm just going to compare and contrast two neighborhoods in particular. College Hill, where Brown University is located, and Olneyville, which is a community that I work with, that I'm going to be telling you about here. College Hill, 80.2 residents have a college degree, and 71.4 are non-Hispanic white. Olneyville, 16.8% have a college degree, and 16.5% are non-Hispanic white. College Hill, top 5% income households make an average of $619,000 per year, the highest of all Providence neighborhoods. Olneyville, the top 5% households make less than $124,000 a year, the least of all Providence neighborhoods. So when we go to Brown, when we go to ICERM, we're seeing a particular side of Providence. And I remember like people at ICERM like, oh yeah, I mean, it's like so not diverse here, it's so white. I was like, wait, whoa, no, like Providence is not like that, like ICERM is like that. I think that's an important point in my perspective, and I know like, hey, like Providence is the most diverse. That's where I went to Spanish-speaking church. Like, like no, it exists. We exist. So in the process of being there, there was this like moment. So I organized a long program, but due to many things, not limited to COVID, we did, instead of a traditional semester in a fall or spring, we did kind of half and half across 2 summers. So we were there in the summer of 22 and the summer of 23. And in the summer of 22, I was like, this is where I get to sort of build relationships. So we did a lot of like, kind of trying to meet new people, new community, nonprofits, organizations that I might be able to reconnect, because it's been a long time since I lived there. And Rhode Island's like a place where like, you gotta know a guy to know a guy. Like, I don't know if folks know that, but like, it's like that kind of place. So my sister, who still lives in Rhode Island, she was like, Carrie, you gotta meet these people. They got this program, this Nuevas Voces program, and they're just doing such cool things. And I was like, well, what's the program? And she's like, oh, well, they do like restoration around like watersheds to like mitigate flooding. And I'm like, I don't know how mathematicians are gonna be involved with that, but like, you know a guy, and I know you, so like, I'll meet him. We'll see what happens. So I sat down and I learned a lot about them. It's the Woonasquatucket River Watershed Council, WRWC. And if you see here, this is Providence. College Hill is over here. You can see brown. ISERM's like down here. Oh, look, the General Consulate of Guatemala is here. So that's the other Providence. And this is the Woonasquatucket River, and this is Olneva, okay? So one of the things they really focus on is, there's a lot of flooding in Providence, and a lot of it happening in neighborhoods that are primarily rental, primarily immigrant. And they're like, we really want to work with this community to help take care of these issues. And yeah, I just started talking to them and learning about Nuevas Voces, this program that they had. And what happened was they got this cohort together. They started it during the pandemic, so it started on Zoom. And they had this cohort together of community members who they had recruited. And they compensated them. They gave them childcare for anything that they did in person. They provided translation. They provided all of the technology they needed in order to participate in this professional development program. And they really built like a learning community together, learning about Providence, learning about the river, learning about so many things. But not just that. This was not just, oh, we're gonna tell you about the river and how to save it. They focused on getting these individuals into places of power. So graduates of this program are now representatives to the State House. This is like one of their State House visits they did. Last time I was at ISERM for Black Belt Tapia, they invited me to come along, and it was great. They all did a mock vote. I learned so much. I've never done this before. This is great. And so this program isn't like, I'm gonna teach you. It's like, I'm gonna show you how it works, how decision-making happens, and we're gonna help you get into those places. I think that's a very sort of different perspective. And of that first cohort, there were a couple of graduates, Maria Jose Gutierrez Paz and Jenny Mercado, that became facilitators of the program. So now the leadership of the program is from within the program. And these are amazing people. I'm gonna talk about them a few times, so I'll just quick introductions to them. Maria Jose is from Bolivia. I probably should be updated, probably 4 years ago now she moved here. She actually speaks multiple languages. She was still learning English when I got to know her initially. She used to be an environmental tour guide, like an adventure tour guide in South America before she moved to the US. And Jenny is from Nicaragua, sort of a political asylum seeker, is a certified nurse's assistant in an emergency room at a children's hospital in Providence. So she sees like a lot of like family needs up close. And she's a mother of two, and both really wonderful people. I could just keep going about that. So, you know, the first meeting I had, I didn't have directly with all the Nuevas Voces people. I just had it with the friend that my sister knew who was, you know, in charge of the WRWC. And, you know, we're like, okay, maybe we can meet. So I was like, okay, how do I want this meeting to go? So I want to really dive into that sense of place. So like, I want to build relationships. I don't want this to be transactional. I really started thinking about how do I want this to be a partnership, not just an application area. And so it was about like learning from them. You know, it's been a long time since I've been in Providence. Providence changed a lot. Like that mall in the middle of Providence wasn't there when I was there, like, you know, but it changed a lot in a lot of other ways. And so it takes a lot of humility to say, I'm gonna learn. But one of the things I did is I was like, okay, like, let's come up with a meeting. I'm gonna bring food to that meeting. I'm gonna try to find money to compensate people for that time for meeting. We're gonna take a walk along the river. We're gonna see the places where there's flooding and understand, right? And I think like it's different when you go out there to the river and you see the sign that's like no swimming, and they ask, okay, why is there no swimming? Oh, because this is the most dioxin contaminated water in the US, right? Like that, oh, okay, no swimming, no fishing, okay. But it means something different. Or you walk along and they're like, okay, this is where the flooding went up to. And I'm like, but that's the whole park. And they're like, yep, yeah, the whole park was underwater, right? And so it means something different. And I had participated in this wonderful program that it was mostly focused on setting up REU programs for data science for social good. But they gave some really, really good advice in talking to prospective partners. And they said, instead of saying like, okay, how can we help you? Like, you know, they said, ask, what arguments do you need to make that you think would be better with data, or people are asking you for the data? And they were like, oh, so many things. They were so excited that we were like gonna help them like get the data they needed to make the arguments they were gonna make. I have never seen anybody so excited about meeting a mathematician before, let me tell you. Like, this is not the usual reception I get, but when I was like looking at them and they're like, we're gonna get that data and we're gonna get empowered, I was like, okay, I don't know what ride I'm riding, but I'm riding this ride with you because this is gonna be amazing. So, I mentioned a little bit about how polluted, when you look at these like flooding maps of the area, they have these different layers. Like here's an area that we think is not prone to flooding. Here's an area that we think is prone to flooding every 100 years. Here's an area that's like prone to flooding every 25 years. Well, those are totally outdated. The area that they think is gonna flood only once every 25 years is now annual. I mean, I was there like over the summer, and like 3 times they had to close down I-95 interstate because of flooding in the area. And that increased rain intensity that we've seen with climate change, it's like flash flood risk. I mean, you have like very little warning, right? So people's cars get flooded and damaged because they didn't have time to move it, or they're at work or whatever, right? And it's complicated because it's like because it's a river that goes out into the outlet of the Narragansett Bay, which pours into the ocean. Not only do you have like thinking about coastal flooding, but you also have regular river extra pressure due to raining rather, and so the two combined, it's like gets backed up. And already, like we were talking about, okay, well, this used to be like a really contaminated river because of dioxin, but then it's also important to know that Providence is on a combined sewer system. So what that means is that if you have flooding, like things they're kind of coming out of the drains that they're supposed to go in when it rains, sewage is coming out of there too, okay? So this is very, very unhealthy, deadly. So flooding is a life and death issue here in Providence. And it's not the only issue. There's a lot going on. So I just wanted to say a moment about, Olneyville, for example, like has, one of the most concentrations of people of color in the entire state of Rhode Island, and very few, mostly English language learner speakers, or most in the state. It's one of the lowest income areas in the entire state. And at the same time, when we talk about environmental justice, we talk about how these things intersect with all of these other risks. And so Olneyville also, on a national scale, is 99th percentile in a bad way for air toxic cancer risk and for air toxic respiratory health index. So when Jenny Mercado is saying like, hey, like we have a lot of people coming to the children's ER during this season because of asthma. Like, that is not independent of the town you live in, the economic conditions you have, right? So there's a lot to sort of unpack here in the way that, like, environment intersects, you know, social justice and people's lives in these ways. And so, you know, where is a community supposed to turn, right? Like, here's this like massive like project called EJ Screen by the Environmental Protection Agency, Environmental Justice Screen. I mean, it's fine, but it's really for academic use. Like, it doesn't really give you very good information for advocacy, for community advocacy. The reports are really cumbersome. You can't always like look at multiple layers that are important for your data. Like, it's not built for the community. Here's another example, you know, and it might seem sidetracked, but everything is so holistically connected. And like, how can a mom, you know, care today about the flooding when she's like worried about how her kids are doing in school, right? And so like, here's another issue, like Providence school systems, right? So they have this quasi-school choice. So you have to like say like, oh, I want my kids to go to these schools. Well, how do you know if they're any good? Like, if you go to a tool like on their website, you can maybe see where the schools are. It doesn't tell you anything about how well they're serving students, especially students that might be still learning English. So there's all this data out there. It's just completely not useful for actual decision making by the humans who live there. So that first summer at ICERM was really about getting to know these problems, and we continued working on them together. And I brought together a group of some of reunion mathematicians and a few more for a long mini program during the winter term at IMSI. And we even brought out Jenny and Maria Jose with us. And we came up with the best acronym ever for our project, VECINA, which means, besides neighbor, means visualizing environmental and community information for neighborhood advocacy. I know, great, right? Yeah. Okay. So we came out there with like this giant to-do list. Like, we're not even partway through this to-do list. There's always going to be more work to do. But here are some of the things we were thinking about. We were thinking about flooding. We were thinking about environmental justice or green justice zones, like how to classify, like, you know, is this a target area? We were thinking about trying to understand the community resources that were already available and how to let people know about them. We were thinking about schools and whether like English language learners could be successful. We were thinking about heating costs and tenant rights. And then at the same time, the data side of me was like, how do we make this usable? How do we not reproduce just like the same old tool just because the tool is sophisticated and has a fancy database? So we want the data that we curate in this project to be owned by Nuevas Voces, by the community, not by the researcher, or at least co-owned, right? We want it to be really easy to update. If there is a change in a phone number or something, we want the community members to be able to make that update, not necessarily requiring us. We want the ability to tell stories. We want it to be in Spanish first. We want to support oral storytelling or be able to have it read audibly on a map. Because a lot of folks, even though they speak Spanish, Spanish is actually not their first language. They come with maybe an indigenous language, and then so they only know how to talk in Spanish, but not necessarily how to read. So even more complicated. And then I'm just big fan of not reinventing the wheel. If there's a product already out there that can do that for me, I'm not going to try to like invent something just to invent something. And so this is kind of where our project is now. This is over several iterations, but this is a website that kind of houses things together. So you can look it up, VECINA.wrwc.org. Okay, so let me tell you just a little bit about just a couple projects. So first, we targeted that community advocacy information. So if we were to look at something like EJ Screen or some of the other tools and look about schools or something, it just says, you know, here's a thing. It doesn't tell you anything about the thing. It just tells you it exists, not very useful. we want to bring in some people. We want to bring in information that matters. So here's what we started to develop with looking at the schools in particular so that parents could help have some resources for the school choice program. Because we showed up at MC, right? And we're like, oh yeah, we're going to focus on flooding. And then Jenny was like, I'm helping a new family immigrate to this area, and their kid needs to sign up for school in 2 weeks. What can you tell me about which school they should sign up for? And then we pivoted fast, and we pivoted to looking at the educational data. And you do that. You do that. It's not about you, it's about them. And so we pulled down all the data for testing data that was like kind of some data we could get a hold of. And importantly, we were able to disaggregate that data by the success of English language learning students and non-ELL students. Okay. You can kind of see here English language learning students in English and language arts examinations at this dual language school. Only less than 5% passed their exam, met or exceeded expectations for this exam. I mean, all students overall did not grade, it was 20%. Math is actually better, kind of just over that 5%, and 25. And then science looks like no one met or exceeded. So, so like here's, we were sitting down with Jenny, we're like, okay, so here are the results for the middle schools. Which middle school would you all choose? I know, it's not good. It's not good. I think what we ended up deciding is that little ES for Espanol, that was something that she wanted added to all the maps that had specific programs for dual language immersion, and because the student was brand new to the US, that's what made the overriding choice for her, but there's no good option. And in fact, the Providence public school system was overtaken by the state a few years ago because it was not meeting outcomes. That's how bad it is. It is really that bad. What's interesting is that there's a sort of charter schools like trying to fill this gap, maybe trying to do it better. So we looked at charter schools. Actually, some of them are doing better. I think results are mixed for some charter schools, like depending, these are public charters, so they're not private charters that are taking away state funding in the same way. It's still complicated, but like this international charter school, like what's going on with ELL students, I don't know, but Achievement First is doing okay. But all of these were like questions that they brought to us. We don't know the questions to ask. So, she says, okay, well, how are the charters? Everybody's advocating for the charters. I was like, well, let's look at the charters, right? And some of them don't have to report data yet, they're brand new, but yeah. Of course, Jenny also, she to me, she's the epitome of a VECINA. I have to like pause and say this. Like when I was in the participating, growing up as a youth, and my dad was going to the Catholic Church in Providence, he was very, very active with helping new immigrants come into the area. And I think I saw this as like the earliest form of advocacy and justice modeled by my dad. And so when I think about a neighbor, or what that community is like, I think about that, right? So Jenny to me is like the neighbor. She is the VECINA, right? So now like she's like, oh man, like I see all these people come to the emergency room. Like how can we make this situation better? Like what can we do? So the next summer we reconvened. We were at ISERM again, and we did a design sprint as part of an overall workshop that was focused on healthcare. And Joe Hibden and Jenny Mercado co-led this sort of design sprint to do a whole bunch of resources just for healthcare. So we did kind of the same thing as before. We did a map, but we did some things different. So we made sure to point out for this particular hospital, what are some of the things that you can expect? What kinds of translation services are available? Also had iconography related to those keywords. Wanted to see a picture of the entrance from out front so you could see exactly where you were going. And I have to also like point out that my kids were around, so like my daughter used Canva to help come up with these little icons, you know, getting the whole family. It's a family venture now too. And my son made a BuzzFeed quiz for like, okay, like where do I bring my kids to receive medical attention? And so there was a whole like logic map. If you choose this or this, go here. Do you have insurance? Do you not? Are you documented or are you not? And going through that sort of complicated pathway. And the idea being like trying to simplify this community health information. And then this quiz was shared on their WhatsApp group and things like that. We were able to collaborate with a group called Nuestra Salud, who was already working in Providence to identify Spanish-speaking providers. There was an analysis on the sort of ratio of Spanish-speaking people to available providers that was done by a number of team members, and op-eds that were produced as a result of that analysis. There was also another op-ed that Kiara took lead on that was talking about lack of health insurance coverage for adult immigrants, because some of the programs in the pandemic with some extra money had been expanded to allow kids without documentation to get access to health care, but adults did not have that. And so there, you know, we sort of did like a whole suite of things together during this design sprint that were pretty awesome. Okay. So it didn't stop there. You know, I spent this wonderful sabbatical doing all these wonderful things. But then what? Because I wanted to start this relationship. How do I keep it going? How do I promise when I don't have all the resources that could be available? So one of the things I did is I brought it into the classroom. So some folks might be aware there's this program called Pick Math. It's mostly targeted towards, it's called Preparations for Industrial Careers. It's got a SIAM, and it's really focused on like getting students real world industry kind of problem solving experience. But Adriana Salerno had brought it to Bates, and she was at NSF, so I said, I'll teach it. And when she had brought it to Bates, she only had community organizations as partners, no businesses. And so I was like, this is great, that's what I'll do. So I brought in VECINA as one of the partner projects for this class. And I brought that same approach to the research teams that I was using, really thinking about design justice, thinking about the way we wanted to interact with the world or design things and for whom. And foregrounded that, really had all of the teams, there were 3 partners and 5 projects altogether, get to know their partner, propose designs that were based around their partner, get continuous feedback and regular meetings with their partner, et cetera. And there were some, you know, other skill sets that of course I, you know, was teaching along the way in order to do this, but I was like, this is the thing that I think I want mathematicians, applied mathematicians to know. I want them to think really critically about their modeling choices. So, you know, I introduced them to our sort of research community partnerships framework, which was something that I kind of put it early in the slide as if I had that going in, but it's actually something we developed together. We all wrote a paper together, including Jenny and Maria Jose, about what this meant. There was another paper that we had put out as a product of the ICERM work itself on data science and social justice in the mathematics community and the kind of lens and framework we wanted to bring to this work. And so I had 2 teams in that Pick Math class. One was devoted to like tool development, like the mapping tools, and then I had another one that was devoted to the website. Again, I put that pretty website up front, but no, it didn't start that way. We didn't have a website at this point. And one of those students on the website team said this, so fortunately, I don't know how I managed this. at a predominantly white institution. But each team had 2 Latino people on it. One of them that was a native Spanish speaker, and a second that was a heritage speaker/student. And the website team wrote their final report in Spanish for Nuevas Voces, which I think is incredible. One of those students said, this was the first time I saw how I could combine my background and Hispanic studies with mathematics. And it was the first time that they saw that they could do both. They didn't have to choose. One of those students who was from the Tool team, and another student that I recruited, I was able to bring back for another IMSI reunion working group working specifically on this project, mostly focused on the website, on documentation, on really making sure that things were kind of good to go. That was wonderful. They worked all summer, and my student Adri, different Adri, Adri Pastor Miron, it was the one who did the website. So the art that you saw, that she actually hand drew all of that. She's kind of amazing. She's a biology student that was in my intro data science course, and I knew she could draw really well. I was like, I know exactly what you're going to do, because she said, you got any summer opportunities? And I said, I know what you're going to do for me. And actually, the student that had this quote became my thesis student now. And he's Christian Caballo, and he's updating the educational data to include more recent years. And Jing and Adriano, who had come with me to IMSI in Chicago, presented a poster at SACNAS, and they won a poster award for that. So really, really proud of them. Here's me and them at SACNAS together. Other things to brag about, we got a couple of podcasts. So one we did with IMSI, they did a podcast. I love it. They got sort of excerpts from a lot of different mathematicians and from people like Jenny who were working on the project. So I encourage you to listen to it. It's called Carry the Two is the podcast that IMSI has, and it's in there. But then recently, as we've been working on some professional, bringing this into the Nuevas Voces curriculum, because that's still ongoing, Jenny and Maria Jose, along with WRWC, made their own podcast in Spanish. So that's pretty exciting. I think that should be up on our website soon. Jenny and Maria Jose, they just keep doing amazing things. They were SciComm fellows, and then Jenny is one of the directors of the New Providence Resilience Hub, and at the time where we were, right after we were working on this education project, she actually ran for school board for Providence. She didn't get elected, but she got the mayor to appoint her. so she's on the school board now. So I think it's just that sort of incredible. And I have to do a big shout out to the Math Institutes for kind of pieceworking a lot of this together, and for thinking outside of the box to bring people like to Chicago who are not PhD mathematicians, because this work wouldn't be possible without really having them there. So this is the sort of VECINA team now. We have people rotating in and out depending on what working group we're doing, things like that. So this is our team today, but changes probably next semester. We just got a second round of introducing all of the resources that are available to the Nuevas Voces students. That was actually happening while I was on the plane coming here, but other people were doing a great job. And we already have a long to-do list coming out of that, or people were like, oh, can you make this feature, or ooh, correct this thing. And so, I mean, that's all part of the iterative cycle. Could we add a whole map about elder care kinds of issues? That's a whole nother thing, right? And so the work is never going to stop. There's so much to go around here, so yeah. And it's expanding. So we were approved to do another working group design sprint at ISERM this upcoming summer, specifically focused on flooding. So we kind of finally came back around to that regular idea. We're partnering with some modelers at URI who are more local. They have a program called My Coast Data, where people can report flooding events. And we also have a pilot project called VECINA, which is our AI chatbot. So the idea is like, okay, yeah, you can go yourself to go through our website, but if you were able to just inquiry a chatbot, maybe that's going to make things a lot easier. So we're still moving on that, but we're pretty excited. If you want to like see the chatbot, you're welcome to like see that QR code and do it. But my dad is on the team because he's retired and he just can't be retired, and so he he was telling me all about AI things and chatbot, and he wants to do like, he's living in coastal Maine. He's like, I want to use chatbot to understand like coastal Maine history, and I was like, how about chatbot to help Providence people? And he was like, oh, I could do that. And then he came down and he saw, like when he came and visited our site, I think I have a picture of, yeah, here he is. Here he is in the wheelchair because my dad is disabled. And he looked around and he's like, oh my God, I know you, you're the daughter of my best friend. And like, it was like, and he's like, this is like back in the church, we were helping each other. And he totally understood. He saw it. It was like, this is like VECINA is like, it's like the digital version of like what we used to do as a community 40 years ago, 30 years ago. So all of that has been amazing. And this is a quote from Jenny Mercado about that very first IMSI trip. When I came back from Chicago and I talk about this with my girls, about everything I did and everything that you guys are doing, I know you know, I got some tears because I was like, oh my God, even though we think that we're not part of the community, there's people out there that care. This is on that IMSI podcast, so if you really want to cry, just listen to that podcast, because I can't even like go through the quote without crying. But I think in this time where science is seen as attacked and not useful, and who's it good for, especially like, you know, math, where there are a lot of wonderful people doing theory things, but then like, what does that mean for everybody else? Like, here are some folks who are like talking to their daughters about how cool these mathematicians are. Like, when else does that happen? And that wasn't on part of my like expectations for broader impacts when I submitted the original IMSI proposal, right? So it's been really rewarding. I think thinking about what you're doing, why you're doing, how you're doing it, the decisions you're making along the way, it's given me a kind of an opportunity to do some really purposeful work, and feeling good about the work I'm doing, and sort of bringing those pieces together again. So, thank you.